Alright artists, grab your sketch from last week. We're going to grab some clay or dough, no matter what you have. We're going to grab a little bit of water because you might need it, and maybe a toothpick so we can add some designs. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to be using some modeling clay today. Again, you might be using something different. That's totally okay. I'm going to begin by first kneading out this dough. It's probably going to be pretty hard no matter what you are using, so go ahead and take a little bit of time. Crush it in between your fingers. We're going to want to make sure we kind of roll it around. We want to make sure we get it much softer than it is. Once you feel like you've really kneaded out your clay or your dough, we're going to go ahead and flatten it down into a slab because we're going to go ahead and need to roll this guy out. You can see I'm using a kitchen roller here, and we're going to need to actually redraw another kimono on top of it. That again, we're transferring our design from paper to clay. So roll it out, make sure it's nice and flat, get that good slab, and then we're going to take our toothpick and we're actually going to do the same steps that we did last week of drawing it. So remember, start with a horizontal line straight across. Draw your 2 vertical lines down on each side. These are going to be the outside parts of your sleeve. Go ahead, draw horizontal lines a little bit smaller that connect down at the bottom of those vertical lines. That's going to be the end of your sleeves. Draw those vertical lines up. Once again, that's the inside part of our sleeves. And then we're going to draw 2 vertical lines down about halfway through the end part of our sleeves on either side. Draw those down and then connect at the bottom with the horizontal line and check it out. You drew the basic shape of your kimono once again. Now what you're going to want to do is cut out your kimono from the rest of your clay or your dough. So just go ahead and take your toothpick, press down, and go ahead around the entire edge of your kimono that you just drew and work on cutting it away and getting rid of those extra parts. You might need them later, and I'll show you why. But go ahead, we just want to see our kimono shape, so remove all excess clay or dough. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go around my edges and sort of smooth them out. You can see here with the modeling clay that I'm working with, some of my edges got a little bit rough while I was cutting it out. So I'm just going to go around the edge. I'm using a little bit of water to kind of smooth it out. You could even just use your finger, make sure no rough edges are around. Now, if you remember, the area here in the middle, this little belt that we're going to add on is what we call the OB. So you're just going to want to draw those 2 horizontal lines, or if you'd like to add a couple extra horizontal lines, you could go ahead and do that. And as soon as we have our OB, we're also going to need to go up to the top and again show the overlapping of our fabric. You can do that by creating a Y shape. So we're going to have 2 diagonal lines that are going to intersect, and then down at the bottom you can draw a vertical line that goes down from the bottom of your OB to the bottom of your kimono. I'm also making the choice to go ahead and add some additional lines just to go ahead and give it a little bit of a color look, but I also want to talk to you guys about adding on with additional clay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take some extra clay that I have and I'm going to roll it into a coil. I'm going to use that coil to actually enhance the lines that I already made and have them be an additive part onto my kimono. Now when we carve in with our toothpick, that's actually called reduction because we're taking away from the clay, but if we take extra clay and put it on top, it's called additive. Now, as you guys can see here, I'm only using white. That's the only color of modeling clay that I have. So if you are using maybe a variety of different colors, this is where you could come in and you could add a different color for your overlapping of your fabrics and your OB that's different from the actual color of your kimono. When we add details, you could use different colors there. Again, if you're only using white like I am, don't worry. At the end of the video, I'm going to show you about how we can paint this clay or this dough. So let's go ahead and talk about adding in the details that we drew out on our paper kimonos and adding them to our clay kimonos. So you guys can see here, I'm going to start with my obi. Again, I can use my toothpick to create some of those designs. So I'm doing that first by going over my obi and adding in my dots. But even though I'm coming down to the bottom here of my kimono, I'm starting to add my overlapping circles, again, that geometric pattern, and I'm just doing it by carving into the clay. So I really like to see on your kimonos if you are to do some reductive, all right, where you are carving into your clay, but also some additive where you're taking your designs and you're actually taking extra pieces of clay or dough and putting it on top. So I'm going to be showing you a little bit here on mine, how I'm going to be adding those two things, additive and reductive, and you can follow along and watch me as I go to carve mine out. Now obviously this in the video has been sped up quite a bit, but you guys can see here that as I'm getting towards the end of transferring my design from my paper to my clay kimono, I have some elements which I have carved, again reductive, and other elements where I have added on extra clay, additive. So let's look directly at my sun. Down at the bottom of my kimono you can see additive, but check out my cherry blossoms. Down at the bottom I decided to make them reductive, but up here at the top, check it out, I'm adding on some clay, so additive. All right, go ahead, keep working on your design. Now, depending on what kind of clay or dough you have, you're likely going to need for it to have some time to dry. If you're using modern clay or if you're using air dry clay, even Play-Doh, you might want to go ahead and set that off to dry for about a day or so. If you're using something like polymer clay, Sculpey clay, you can go ahead and put that in the oven to bake it. So I'll be seeing you guys shortly to talk about color. Okay, so once your kimono has dried, we're gonna go ahead and talk about adding color. So I'm gonna be using these tempera cake paints. You can use whatever you have. Again, this is only if you're not using colored dough or colored clay. So you could use watercolors, you could use tempera paint, acrylic paint, whatever you have to go ahead and add color, because now these have been hardened, okay? So now, if you're like me and yours is white and you need to add some color, let's go ahead and start with the base color of our kimono. You can choose whatever color you would like. I'm gonna go ahead and start with blue, and I'm gonna fill in all the areas of my kimono. I want my fabric color to be blue. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill in all the areas around where my details are and make sure that I fill those parts in blue. Now you can see that when I come down to where I have my pattern, maybe also where I have my sleeves, where my fabric's overlapping, my obi, I may want to do those as different colors, so I definitely don't need to do those blue. This is again just the fabric areas where I want it to show through that this is blue, this is the one color that it is, and I can add in other detail colors, for instance, like the pink for my cherry blossoms or the color of my sun down at the bottom. I can add those colors in after. Again, start with your base layer first for the fabric color of your kimono. So again, as I said earlier, once you're done with your base color layer for your Japanese kimono, you can go ahead and move on to those details. So you can see I've already started to add the yellow sun as well as the pink for my cherry blossoms. And now I can go ahead and start to think about some of the other areas too, like my obi or where my fabrics overlap. Now, if you're having trouble picking out what colors to use on your kimono, maybe you could think about some different color families. For instance, you could think about analogous colors, so what colors are beside each other on the color wheel. You could think about complementary colors, what colors are across from each other on the color wheel, as well as maybe some other color families like primary colors or secondary colors. Or how about warm colors and cool colors? Go ahead and maybe think about that as you are starting to add to your kimono. Once again, this video has obviously been sped up to help save you some time, but hopefully this gives you some ideas as you're going through and you're adding colors into your Japanese kimono. Now, coming to our very last thing, let's talk about that space that is in the back. We're seeing the back of our kimono, and it's right behind where our fabrics overlap. So since this is going to be the inside back of your kimono, like if you were wearing it, you could go ahead and maybe work with a color that contrasts with your base color, or you could think about doing a darker version. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab a dark blue, and I'm going to fill in that little triangular space there to go ahead and complete the last step of my Japanese clay kimono that has been transformed from paper to clay. Oh my goodness, it's beautiful. Well, I cannot wait to see what yours look like. Make sure you go ahead and send me a picture as soon as you are done. And now I will bid you goodbye, artists, by saying goodbye in Japanese. Sayonara.